The engine stand and the bench we built when we first moved in here. In fact, we didn't actually open the shop until we had built some benches and put up some of the paneling and stuff so we could put up for parts and all that kind of stuff and our special tools. So yeah, that seems quite familiar.
Well, hey, Jerry, I just wanted to say thank you so much for showing up today to share with us your story. And I think it's so important. And like I told you a couple of years ago, that I think not just myself or the people who know you personally, but people out there who are Volkswagen enthusiasts need to know and hear the story, because a lot of people think that VW repair shops is a dying breed, but you guys had blessed so many people in this community of Central Oregon and beyond. I think people should hear that story. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, who would have expected 48 years from the starting date, that we'd still be doing the same thing, and probably Gary hadn't gotten sick, Gary would still be working. If you're a workaholic, you work.
Right, and he loved what he did.
Oh, he did, and he was up to the time where he just didn't feel well enough to keep on doing it.
Yeah, well, that's good. Well, when was your first, when did you have your first passion with Volkswagen?
Well, it was funny because I was actually in the Navy and I picked up a 67 Type 3 fastback.
Okay.
And I had sold my 66 Chevelle, which, kind of afterwards I wished I should have kept that going. But anyway, I was stationed in San Diego, and so I drove it back and forth, from San Diego. And then when I got back to got into San Francisco, they changed ships, and the ship was stationed out of a different port in the United States. Mm-hmm. And so so that's kind of where I really kind of started. But Gary actually started in the Volkswagen business like in 67 or 68. He worked for Norm Bishop Volkswagen and in Boise.
Okay.
And my uncle was a salesman and then a mechanic there, and he got Gary a job there, and that's where he got all the training. And he knew he wanted to start a shop, but he didn't want to compete with the people that trained him. So that's when we just happened to have his wife's brother that lived here in Bend, and he told us we need to come here and check this place out, and that's kind of how it got started. We drove through 3rd Street and counted all the Volkswagens, because at that time that was the snow car.
Okay, now that's going to be a question down the line here.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
No, you're fine. That's fine. It's just so people know who are watching this. They might want to know who Gary is.
Okay, Gary's my older brother, and he's the one that actually was the better mechanic, and he's always been into mechanics. I always liked cars. But if I had cousins that would work on them, or brothers, I would take advantage of that. And so that's kind of the way it went.
And so there lies the name of Young Brothers, Young's Old Volkswagen.
Yeah, Young's Old Volkswagen.
Where did you guys come up with that name?
Well, it's funny because it was kind of somebody had brought that, the old Volkswagen, and we go, well, Young's Old Volkswagen, and that's just kind of the way it went, and we just ran with it, and
back to that.
So, okay.
Right. Okay. So where did you come up with the name Young's Old Volkswagen?
Okay, it was kind of the name Old Volkswagen. We heard about a place out of Wyoming or Montana. Somebody just had said, hey, there's a place, blah, blah, blah. So we changed it and it was Old Volkswagen. We changed it to Young's Old Volkswagen.
Okay.
And OLE, some people call it Ole, but it's actually, OLE. But if you live in Idaho, spicy southern Idaho.
Right. So then your name was something different before you changed?
No. That was our given name when we, when we opened.
Gotcha. Yeah. And what year was that?
That was in 74. And we came here the first part of October and opened the shop at the end of October. It took us, several weeks, to build the benches and get everything going. But we had people knocking on our door just from us letting them know that we were in town. And we started handing out cards if we seen a Volkswagen, we'd put a card on its windshield.
Okay, yeah.
And one time, apparently somebody hit the car, and
Are you serious?
oh yeah,
Oh, man.
and they come to us, go, did you guys hit our car? And we go, no.
That
That's
was
not
before it
good.
happened.
Not good advertisement.
Yeah. Sorry, we're not a body shop. We're a repair shop. Yeah, that's
So, but anyway, no, that's kind of like, but that's how it just got started.
Okay.
People came to us that at that time it was Mid-Orient Motors,
okay. Yeah.
and like a lot of the dealership, people weren't happy with the dealerships, because of the cost and the expense. Everything was more.
Right.
And when we opened our business, we were at $10 an hour.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
$10 an hour, and so a complete major overhaul with parts and everything sometimes was just barely over $300.
Those days are over.
Yeah, they're gone. They were gone, long gone. But it didn't take long for that to change.
Sure.
Because we went from $10 an hour to the time we finished to $120.
Right. Now, you started out in the building or the
Exactly.
bay behind
12.
me.
And number 12, and both of us worked. We didn't have a hoist. We both worked on cars on ramps
Mm-hmm.
on the ground with two of us working, and which was pretty tight. With two cars, and of course, obviously, trying to get one done at the same time you get the other car done. Anyway, it didn't take long for us to move into this side, and I say that I think that was still 5 or 6 or 7 years.
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, because you moved in here in the early 80s, right? And this side right here,
Yeah.
I believe is what I remember you saying
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
Yeah. So this has always been the air-cooled bay.
Right.
And then when you switched, when you both had the two bays, was it that Gary just decided to do water-cooled
No,
at that
I
point?
was pretty much doing the air-cooled almost from the beginning. Yeah.
Okay.
And Gary was doing that. That time the rabbits were coming up pretty big,
Right.
and so the rabbits and the
Scirocco's
yeah,
and all
just
that.
all the different ones, and then it wasn't until '96 then Scott jumped in with us,
Right.
and then we opened a third bay.
That's amazing, the progression of that. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So you moved to Oregon, like you said, in 1974. Is that what you told me? Okay.
Yeah, we lived with our brother-in-law, until we could come up with homes, or apartments, and whatever. So
Now, it's amazing because you lived in that same house, though, since when?
well, only 2 years. I was able, because of my military, I was able to get a GI loan,
Okay.
and I was able to get the house after 2 years. So in June of '76, I was able to buy a house on the west side for
Yeah.
$30,000.
Now, anybody who watches this video, when they hear that $30,000 on the west side of Bend,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, and now it's worth over $1 million. But
That's-
I made a few additions, yeah. So it's not quite like it was.
Well, I know you kind of touched on this, but I have it written down here. So tell us about the first few years of the business and what it was like living here in Central Oregon back then.
Oh yeah, I think there was like 3 or 4 stoplights in all of Bend. I mean, there was the ones downtown, and then one coming in on Highway 20.
Okay.
And there was, when we finally started having children and all that stuff, our wives would have to go to Eugene or Salem to buy school clothes.
Oh, because
There wasn't really that much here in town.
the Wagner Mall was it here? Or?
Yeah, but they didn't have, at that time, they didn't really have, they had like Sprouse Rights and,
Sprouse Rights, I haven't even heard
yeah. So it's, it wasn't a whole lot. And then they had a men's store downtown, but,
Okay.
it was a nicer shop and all that stuff, but not really made for kids.
But this was like when it was a pure log town.
Oh, it was, yeah. I mean, logging was everything. Logging was everything. It was a big deal.
And you mentioned that the Volkswagens that were here, they were here because they were good snow cars.
Yeah, and exactly. at that time, a rear wheel with a front engine, typical American car, had terrible traction. Unless I can't remember. Did we have studs back then? I'm not even
Yes,
sure.
there were
They did
studs.
have it in the '70s.
Yeah.
Okay, but with a Volkswagen, with the rear engine, rear wheel drive, and they were, there was an incredible traction car compared to the American cars at that time, unless you had a four-wheel drive. And at that time, there really wasn't that many four-wheel, people like there is nowadays.
Sure. I've seen a picture of Mount Bachelor at the parking lot of Mount Bachelor. When you look at all the cars lined up there was probably at least 30% Volkswagen in that photo.
It really was, because it really was a good car to get up to the mountain.
I think that was
terrible, great heat coming up the hill. Terrible heat
going down.
That was not a good deal. Yeah. You had your scraper on the inside and your towels and to wipe the windows and all that stuff.
That kind of segues into my next question. So compared to today, in your point of view, was there more Volkswagens here in Central Oregon at that time than there is now?
Well, it's hard. It's hard to say. They're different. It's a whole different thing. Back then, people were driving them year round.
Right.
And then it got to the point, once the Subarus and four-wheel drive, things started coming out, then the Volkswagen become more of a collector's item, and there's still people driving year-round, but the truth is, a lot of people were garaging them in the wintertime because of the heat and all that kind of stuff.
Right, technology got a little bit more
exactly,
advanced.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, what was your favorite model of Volkswagen?
Well, of course, 67 was kind of, because that's when they went from 6-volt system, and the 12-volt system was definitely a big, huge improvement in the Volkswagen line, and that made quite a difference. So that was kind of the beginning of the progression of the air-cooled, going to a 12-volt system, and then going to a dual-port engines and more horsepower, starting off at 36 horsepower and clear up, I think even less than that.
25,
yeah. So you went from a 36 to a 40 horse to a 50 horse to a 60 horse,
Right.
And that's pretty much where the standard Volkswagen kind of stopped. And when they went with the fuel injected in 75 was the first year for the fuel injection, they put smaller valves, and so they weren't as quite as fast. They thought the offset would be good, but there's still I think the older ones with the bigger valves and would work better.
Okay.